Leila Blackwood's night shift turns into a nightmare when her obsessive boyfriend, Damien, corners her delivery van in a deserted lot. With the windshield shattering and nowhere to run, she fumbles for her phone to message her ex for rescue. But the shaking fingers that hit send reached the wrong man. Instead of a plea for help to a former flame, a savage Korean Mafia boss receives her location and replies with 5 chilling words. They won't live to see sunrise. Hiding behind the steering wheel of her delivery van, Leila is a portrait of vulnerability, bruised, trapped, and still wearing the helmet that couldn't protect her from Damien's rage. She is a woman who has spent her life delivering for others, now left with nothing but a cracked screen and a fading signal. In her final moment of desperation, a mistaken digit connects her to the most feared name in the underworld, Jinwoo Kim. The neon signs of the city blurred into streaks of synthetic pink and blue as Leila Blackwood leaned her bike into a sharp turn. The heavy delivery bag on her back shifted, a constant reminder of the weight she carried every night just to keep her head above water. To the people in the high-rise apartments, she was just a ghost in a helmet, a nameless gear in the machine of their convenience. But to Leila, every mile was a calculated escape from the apartment she shared with Damien Cross. Tonight, the air felt thick, charged with the humidity that preceded a storm. Her phone buzzed against her thigh, a rhythmic, demanding vibration she knew all too well. She didn't have to look to know it was him. Damien didn't just want to know where she was, he wanted to own the space she occupied. Earlier that evening, the mask had slipped again. It started with a cold dinner and ended with Damien pinning her against the kitchen counter, his fingers digging into the soft flesh of her shoulders until she gasped. "You're late, Leila," he'd whispered, his breath smelling of stale beer and a simmering, toxic possessiveness. "Who are you really out there for? Is it Ethan? Is that why you're working these late shifts?" He had thrown her delivery helmet across the room, the plastic cracking against the wall, a sound that still echoed in her ears like a gunshot. She had fled under the guise of an urgent order, but the city offered no sanctuary tonight. As she pulled into the gravel lot of a dimly lit warehouse district for her final drop-off, the roar of a familiar engine cut through the silence. Her heart plummeted. In her rearview mirror, the aggressive grille of Damien's black sedan appeared, blocking the exit. He killed the lights, but the moonlight caught the silhouette of him stepping out of the car. Leila scrambled back into her delivery van, her fingers fumbling with the lock just as he reached the door. Thud. His fist collided with the glass, a terrifying rhythm that matched the frantic beating of her heart. "Open the door, Leila. We aren't done talking." Damien's voice was a low growl, vibrating through the metal. He began to rock the van, the suspension groaning under his rage. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was unhinged, fueled by the suspicion that she was slipping through his fingers. Leila crawled into the space between the seats, her breath coming in ragged hitches. She reached for her phone, her vision tunneling. She needed Ethan. Ethan was safe. Ethan was the only person who knew the truth about Damien's moods. The windshield spiderwebbed as Damien swung a heavy maglite against the glass. "I know you're in there." With trembling hands, she swiped her thumb across the screen, the red smear of a small cut on her finger staining the glass. Everything was a blur of tears and adrenaline. She found the message thread she thought was Ethan's, a contact she hadn't messaged in months, and typed with a frantic, spasming speed. "I'm trapped. He's going to kill me. Warehouse 4, Old Port Road. PLS help." She hit send, the blue bubble hovering for a grueling second before marked as delivered. She waited for Ethan's frantic "on my way," or "call the cops." Instead, the phone buzzed almost instantly. The contact name at the top wasn't Ethan. It was a string of numbers she didn't recognize, a ghost from a redirected SIM or a me-saved contact. The reply was short, typed with a chilling, surgical calm that didn't belong to an ex-boyfriend. "Don't move, I'm coming." Leila stared at the screen, a new kind of chill washing over her. The man on the other end didn't sound like a savior. He sounded like a reckoning. Outside, the glass finally gave way, showering her in shimmering shards of blue light. The rain finally broke, a torrential downpour that turned the gravel lot into a slurry of mud and glass. Inside the van, Leila pressed herself against the cold metal floor, glass shards biting into her palms. Damien's face was pressed against the jagged gap in the windshield, his eyes wild with a terrifying mixture of triumph and cruelty. He reached through the hole, his fingers clawing for the lock, his laughter lost to the thunder, until the world suddenly went silent. A pair of blinding LED headlights cut through the storm, washing the lot in a clinical, white glare. Damien froze, shielding his eyes as a fleet of 3 matte black SUVs drifted into the lot with the synchronized grace of predators. They didn't park, they surrounded. The engines didn't idle, they purred with a low-frequency growl that Leila felt in her marrow. The driver's side door of the lead vehicle opened. A man stepped out, ignoring the rain that instantly soaked his dark, tailored suit. He didn't rush. He moved with the terrifying composure of someone who owned the air everyone else breathed. This was Jinwoo Kim. Even from a distance, the scar near his cheek seemed to catch the light, a silver thread of history written in violence. Damien, emboldened by his own adrenaline, stepped away from the van. "Hey, this is private business. Get the hell out of here," he screamed, reaching for the heavy maglite in his waistband. Jinwoo didn't say a word. He didn't need to. 2 men in black suits emerged from the shadows behind him, moving so fast they were a blur. Before Damien could raise his arm, he was on his knees. One man had Damien's wrist twisted in a grip that elicited a sickening crack. The other held a silenced pistol to the base of his skull. The transition from aggressor to victim was so instantaneous, it left the air tasting of ozone and terror. Jinwoo approached the kneeling man, his black leather gloves shimmering under the rain. He stopped inches from Damien, looking down not with anger, but with a profound, chilling boredom. "You are loud," Jinwoo said, his voice a deep, melodic rasp that carried over the storm. He reached down, gripping Damien's jaw with a single gloved hand, forcing him to look up. "And you are messy. I don't like mess." With a flick of his wrist, Jinwoo sent Damien sprawling into the mud. He didn't look back at the whimpering man. His focus shifted entirely to the delivery van. Leila watched through the cracked window, her breath hitching as the savage king walked toward her. He reached the door and didn't pull at it. He waited. It was a silent command. Trembling, Leila reached up and unlocked the latch. The door slid back, and the freezing night air rushed in, carrying the scent of Jinwoo's expensive cologne, sandalwood and cold iron. He looked at her, his dark eyes scanning the bruise on her cheek and the helmet still strapped to her head. For a heartbeat, the ruthlessness vanished, replaced by a terrifyingly intense focus. He reached out a hand. It wasn't an invitation, it was an ultimatum. "Leila Blackwood," he said, his voice dropping to a private whisper. "You sent the text. Now you belong to the man who answered it." Before she could find her voice, he gripped her waist and lifted her from the van as if she weighed nothing. Her feet barely touched the mud before she was being ushered into the back of the lead SUV. The interior was a cavern of black leather and tinted glass, smelling of new car and power. As the door clicked shut, sealing out the sound of the rain and Damien's distant pleas, Leila realized the trap hadn't been sprung. It had simply changed shape. The SUV began to move, the tires crunching over the gravel as they left the warehouse district behind. Leila looked out the rear window, watching her delivery bike and her old life disappear into the darkness. Beside her, Jinwoo sat in total stillness, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. He didn't look at her, but his hand rested on the seat between them, inches from hers, a silent reminder that the rescue was over and the possession had begun. The transition from the rain-slicked gravel lot to the silent, suffocating luxury of the Kim estate was a blur of high thread count sheets and the medicinal scent of a private doctor. When Leila finally opened her eyes, the world didn't roar with the sound of a delivery bike. It hummed with the discreet, rhythmic pulse of a central air system. Sunlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, revealing a room larger than her entire apartment, filled with minimalist furniture that looked more like modern art than anything intended for comfort. Leila sat up, her muscles screaming in protest. The bruise on her cheek felt tight, treated with a cooling gel that stung slightly. As she scanned the room, she noticed her delivery helmet sitting on a marble pedestal in the corner, a battered relic of a life that felt 1,000 years away. A soft click at the door made her stiffen, her breath catching in her throat as she prepared for Damien's shadow to loom over her. Instead, a familiar face peered in. Leila, oh God, you're awake. Zara, Leila's voice was a dry rasp. Her best friend rushed to the bedside, looking out of place in the sterile elegance of the room. Zara wasn't wearing her usual thrift store layers. She was dressed in an expensive silk robe that looked like it cost more than a year of their shared rent. But it was the look in Zara's eyes, a mixture of relief and profound unease, that made Leila's skin crawl. How are you here? Leila asked, grabbing Zara's hand. Damien, did he find you? No, Zara whispered, glancing nervously toward the heavy oak door. He didn't. They did. 2 men in suits showed up at my workplace 3 hours ago. They didn't ask me to come, Leila. They just told me that you were safe and that I was being moved for security purposes. They said anyone close to you was a liability now. Leila felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Jinwoo hadn't just rescued her, he had collected her. He had identified the only person she cared about and brought her into his cage to ensure there was nowhere else for Leila to run. Is he here? Leila asked. He's in the study, Zara replied. He's terrifying, Leila. He hasn't raised his voice once, but everyone in this house moves like they're walking on eggshells. Leila swung her legs out of bed, her feet sinking into a rug so plush it felt like quicksand. She found a change of clothes, black silk trousers and a matching blouse, waiting for her. She dressed with trembling fingers, the high-end fabric feeling like a second skin she hadn't asked for. She followed Zara out into a hallway that felt like a labyrinth of glass and shadow. They reached a pair of double doors at the end of the wing. Before Zara could knock, the doors swung open as if the house itself knew she was there. Jinwoo Kim sat behind a desk of polished obsidian, the scar on his cheek catching the morning light. He wasn't wearing the suit jacket from the night before, just a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and a glimpse of a dragon tattoo tailing up from his wrist. He was looking at a series of monitors, one of which showed a grainy, live feed of Damien Street. Sit, Jinwoo said, not looking up. It wasn't a request. Leila remained standing, her jaw set. Why is Zara here? I didn't ask you to involve her. Jinwoo finally looked up. His eyes were dark, fathomless, and entirely devoid of apology. He stood, moving with that same predatory grace that had dismantled Damien in seconds. He walked around the desk, stopping just inches from her. The scent of sandalwood and cold iron enveloped her again. You asked for help, Leila. Help in my world is not a favor, it is an investment, he said, his voice a low, resonant hum. He reached out, his gloved thumb tracing the edge of the bandage on her cheek. Damien Cross is a small man with small ambitions, but he has friends in low places. Until he is erased, your friend is a target, and because you are under my protection, she is my responsibility. He leaned closer, his shadow engulfing her. But let's be clear about the strings. I don't provide sanctuary for strangers. You are in my house, eating my bread, protected by my men. You don't belong to the streets anymore. You belong to the Kim syndicate. You belong to me. The following week passed in a blur of forced tranquility. Within the walls of the Kim estate, Leila was treated with a reverence that felt like a mockery of her former life. Every meal was a masterpiece, every garment was silk, but the guards at the end of every corridor remained a constant reminder that this sanctuary was built on a foundation of absolute control. Zara seemed to be adjusting better, seduced by the safety and the high-end distractions, but Leila couldn't shake the feeling of being a bird in a gilded cage, waiting for the owner to decide when she should sing. The morning of the 9th day brought a disruption to the estate's rhythm. Jinwoo had departed for a business meeting in the city, leaving the air in the house feeling thin and cold. Leila was in the sunroom, staring at the manicured gardens, when a servant announced she had a visitor. Mr. Kim doesn't usually allow unvetted guests, Leila said, her heart hammering against her ribs. He isn't a guest of Mr. Kim, the servant replied, his face an unreadable mask. He's a representative of the city. In the receiving room stood a man who looked like a walking piece of iron. Detective Adrian Stone didn't fit in the opulent surroundings. His cheap suit was wrinkled, and his eyes carried the exhaustion of a man who had spent too many years looking at the underside of the world. He didn't sit down. He stood in the center of the room, looking at the high-tech security cameras with open disdain. "Leila Blackwood," he said, his voice a gravelly baritone. "I've been looking for you since the night your delivery van was found abandoned and covered in blood. The department thought you were a corpse." "I'm safe here," Leila said, her voice steadier than she felt. Stone laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Safe? You're in the lair of the most dangerous man in the tri-state area. Do you have any idea who Jinwoo Kim is? He doesn't save people, Leila. He acquires assets. Right now, you're just a shiny new toy he's hiding from the light." He stepped closer, ignoring the subtle shift of the guards by the door. "I know about Damien Cross. I know he's been hitting you for a year. I know you called the precinct 6 months ago and the officers told you it was a domestic dispute and left. I know the law failed you." Leila looked away, the memory of that night. The cold indifference of the uniformed officers, stinging more than Damien's fist ever could. "The law didn't show up at that warehouse," Leila whispered. "He did. He showed up because he wanted a reason to dismantle Damien's associates," Stone countered, his eyes burning with a desperate intensity. "Leila, give me something. Testimony, a location, a name. I can get you into witness protection. I can give you a real life, not this theater. If you stay here, you're just waiting for him to get bored. And when Jinwoo Kim gets bored, people disappear." Leila looked at the detective, then at the scarred, gloved hand of Jinwoo in her mind. Stone represented a system that had watched her suffer and done nothing. Jinwoo represented a monster who had seen her pain and turned it into power. It was a choice between a ghost of a life and a vivid, dangerous reality. "You're too late, detective," Leila said, her voice dropping to a cold, final note. "The city had its chance to protect me. Now I'm protected by someone who actually keeps his promises." Stone's face hardened. He reached into his pocket and slid a card onto the marble table. "He's a savage, Leila. Don't forget that when the silk starts to feel like a noose." As Stone was ushered out, Leila picked up the card, her fingers trembling. She looked at the security camera in the corner, knowing Jinwoo was likely watching the feed from wherever he was. She didn't know if she had made the right choice, but as she watched Stone's battered sedan pull away from the iron gates, she realized she had finally stopped running. She wasn't a delivery girl anymore, and she wasn't a witness. She was something else entirely. The evening air in the estate was thick with the scent of ozone and blooming jasmine as Leila wandered into the dimly lit library. The heavy scent of old paper and expensive tobacco pulled her toward the far corner, where Jinwoo sat by the fireplace. He wasn't the untouchable king she had seen in the study. He was hunched over a low table, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, and his black leather gloves cast aside on the velvet rug. It was the first time she had seen his bare hands. They were large, mapped with faint white lines of scar tissue, but surprisingly steady. As she stepped into the light, he turned his head, and the flickering firelight caught the deep, jagged mark near his cheek. Up close, it wasn't a clean line. It was a rough, violent history etched into his skin, pulling slightly at the corner of his eye. "You're starring," Jinwoo said, his voice dropping into that low, resonant frequency that always seemed to vibrate in Leila's chest. "I didn't mean to," Leila whispered, stepping closer despite the instinct to flee. Does it still hurt?" Jinwoo traced the scar with a blunt fingernail, a ghost of a smile touching his lips, one that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Not for a long time. This was a gift from my father, a reminder that in our world, love is just another word for leverage. He wanted to make sure I never forgot what happens when you let your guard down." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Leila felt the breath leave her lungs. He wasn't looking at her like a possession or a delivery girl. He was looking at her like a mirror. "I grew up in a house where the walls were made of glass and the floors were covered in blood," he continued, his voice devoid of pity. "I survived by becoming the monster they were afraid of. And then I saw you, 5 years ago, standing on that street corner in the rain, sharing your umbrella with a stray dog while your own clothes were soaked through. You had nothing, yet you gave everything away." Leila's heart skipped. "You've really been watching me that long." "You were a masterpiece of resilience, Leila. I watched you endure Damien because I wanted to see if the world would finally break you. But you didn't break. You just got quieter. And when that text came to my phone, I realized I didn't want to watch anymore. I wanted to participate. He stood up, the height of him suddenly overwhelming in the small circle of firelight. He reached out, his bare hand cupping her jaw. His skin was warm, a startling contrast to the cold iron of his reputation. His thumb brushed over her bottom lip, a gesture that was both a caress and a command. I am a savage man, Leila. My hands are stained with things you shouldn't even dream of. But I would burn this entire city to the ground before I let another man lay a finger on you again. The air between them charged with a sudden, electric tension. It was a savage kind of romance, one born of trauma and tempered in the shadows. Leila didn't pull away. For the first time in years, she felt a different kind of heat, one that didn't come from a burner or a radiator, but from the raw, unfiltered honesty of a man who saw her exactly as she was and wanted her anyway. She reached up, her smaller, darker hand covering his, her fingers tracing the jagged scar on his cheek. Then don't just watch me, Jinwoo, she whispered, her voice trembling with a new kind of courage. Show me how to be as dangerous as you are. In the silence of the library, the trap didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like an invitation to a throne. The sanctuary of the estate shifted from a place of recovery to a theater of war the moment Jinwoo received a grainy photograph from his scouts. In the dimly lit tactical room, Leila stared at the screen. It wasn't just Damien. Her ex-boyfriend was standing in a back alley with men whose jackets bore the jagged crest of the O6 Syndicate. Damien hadn't just been hiding. He had sold his soul to Jinwoo's rivals, offering them the one thing they wanted more than territory: Jinwoo Kim's new obsession. He thinks you are a piece of property to be traded, Jinwoo said, his voice as cold as the air in a morgue. And the Osik believe that by taking you, they can make me bleed. They are right about one thing: I will bleed the city dry if they touch you. But I will not always be behind you, Leila. You must learn to be the blade, not just the hand that holds it. The training began in the basement gym, a space of reinforced concrete and flickering fluorescent lights. Jinwoo stripped off his jacket, his black dress shirt clinging to his frame as he stood in the center of the mats. He didn't use a trainer. He took the task himself. Hit me, he commanded. Leila hesitated, her hands curling into weak, uncertain fists. I don't know how. Damien knew how, Jinwoo countered, his eyes narrowing. He used your silence as permission. He used your fear as a cage. Are you still in that cage, Leila, or are you ready to burn it down? He moved toward her, his presence overwhelming. He didn't strike her, but he crowded her space, his shadow engulfing her just as Damien's used to. The panic rose in her throat, the familiar, suffocating urge to shrink, to apologize, to disappear. Don't look away, Jinwoo roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Look at the man who wants to own you. Look at the monster. Now take your life back. Something snapped inside Leila. It wasn't a clean break. It was an explosion. The years of delivering packages to people who didn't see her, the months of hiding bruises under long sleeves, and the sheer terror of that night in the van coalesced into a single, white-hot point of rage. She lunged forward, her fist connecting with Jinwoo's shoulder. It was a clumsy, desperate strike, but it was hers. Jinwoo didn't flinch. He grabbed her arm, his grip firm but not crushing, and spun her around, pressing her back against his chest. Better, but rage without focus is just noise. You need to be silent. You need to be surgical. He placed a small, weighted training knife into her hand. The body is a map of weaknesses, Leila. If they come for you, don't aim for the heart. It's protected by bone and pride. Aim for the places that keep them standing. The tendons, the throat, the eyes. For hours, they moved in a violent dance. He pushed her until her lungs burned and her muscles screamed, forcing her to find the savage part of her soul that she had buried under layers of politeness and survival. He taught her how to use her smaller stature as a weapon, how to disappear into shadows, and how to strike before a man even realized the air had changed. By the time the moon was high, Leila stood in the center of the mats, drenched in sweat, her chest heaving. Her hands were no longer shaking with fear. They were vibrating with a newfound, lethal intent. She looked at Jinwoo, and for the first time she didn't see a captor or a savior. She saw a mentor who had recognized the fire in her and poured gasoline on it. "Again," she whispered, her voice a low, dangerous rasp. Jinwoo wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead, his dark eyes glowing with a dark, predatory pride. "Good. The delivery girl is dead. Now let's see if the queen can hunt." The heavy iron gates of the Kim estate felt less like a barrier and more like a border between two versions of reality. Leila stood by the perimeter fountain, the weight of a small, concealed blade against her thigh a constant reminder of her training. The morning fog was thick when a silver sedan, dented and familiar, pulled up to the security intercom. Her heart stuttered. It was Ethan. Against the advice of the guards, Leila requested a moment at the gate. Ethan looked older, his face etched with a frantic, sweating desperation that made him look small. "Leila, thank you for coming out," he panted, his hands gripped white-knuckle tight on the steering wheel. "I've been looking for you everywhere. I heard about what happened at the warehouse, about that monster who took you." "I'm safe here, Ethan," Leila said, her voice sounding foreign to her own ears, colder, more precise. "Safe, Leila, the guy's a butcher. He's a Korean Mafia kingpin. You're a hostage, even if you don't see it yet." Ethan reached through the window, his eyes wide and pleading. "I have a car waiting 2 miles out. No trackers, no guards. I can get you to a safe house in Vermont. We can start over. Please, before he does to you what he does to everyone else." For a split second, the old Leila, the delivery girl who just wanted a quiet life, longed to reach for the handle. She looked at Ethan and saw the safe choice, the life of hiding and mediocrity. But then she saw the tremor in his hands and the way he kept glancing at the rearview mirror, not with the vigilance of a protector, but with the guilt of a man who had already lost his soul. "How did you find this place, Ethan?" she asked quietly. "Even the police don't have the coordinates for the main house." Ethan froze, the silence stretched, filled only by the rhythmic splash of the fountain. I have friends, people who care about you." The realization hit her like a physical blow. The savage training Jinwoo had put her through kicked in. She began to scan the tree line behind Ethan's car. There, glinting in the mist, was the chrome bumper of Damien's black sedan. "You didn't come to save me," Leila whispered, stepping back as her hand instinctively moved to the blade beneath her silk trousers. "You traded me." Ethan's face collapsed, the mask of the hero sliding away to reveal the coward beneath. "He was going to kill me, Leila. Damien said if I didn't lure you out, I was dead. He's working with the OSIC now. They're too big, even for your new boyfriend." As if on cue, the engine of Damien's car roared to life. And the passenger doors flew open. 3 men in the jagged jackets of the OSIC syndicate emerged, weapons drawn. Ethan slammed his car into gear, tires screeching as he sped away, leaving Leila standing alone in the kill zone. She didn't scream. She didn't run back to the gates to beg the guards for help. Instead, Leila Blackwood stood her ground, her fingers curling around the hilt of her knife. She felt a strange, icy calm. This was the moment the delivery girl truly died. "Damien," she shouted into the fog, her voice a sharp, lethal command. "I know you're there. Stop hiding behind other men's shadows." From the darkness of the lead car, Damien stepped out, a jagged grin splitting his face. "There's my girl, ready to come home." "I am home," Leila replied, dropping into the combat stance Jinwoo had carved into her muscle memory. Behind her, the estate's secondary alarm began to wail, a low, rhythmic thrumming that signaled the arrival of the king. But as the O6 soldiers lunged toward her, Leila didn't wait for Jinwoo. She moved first. The damp, metallic scent of the warehouse was a haunting echo of the night her world had first fractured. Leila's hands were zip-tied behind a rusted pillar, the plastic biting into her wrists, but she didn't struggle. Instead, she breathed through the pain, her mind a cold, analytical machine. She counted the footsteps. 3 men. Damien was packing in front of her, the maglite from the delivery van clicking rhythmically in his hand. "You really thought you could become one of them, didn't you?" Damien sneered, leaning in so close she could smell the sour desperation on his breath. The delivery girl playing at being a mafia princess. Ethan was easy to crack, Leila. Everyone has a price. Yours was just a fancy cage. Leila looked up at him. She didn't see the monster that had haunted her dreams for a year. She saw a weak man trying to convince himself he still had power. "You're right, Damien," she said, her voice eerily steady. "Ethan had a price, but you're just a debt the Osick are waiting to collect." Outside, the distant screech of tires and the staccato of gunfire signaled that Jinwoo had arrived. The Osick soldiers stationed at the door tensed, shifting their focus to the entrance. "He's here," one of them barked. "Finish her and let's go." Damien's face twisted. He raised the heavy flashlight, prepared to strike, but he was moving too slow. He was still fighting the girl from the van. He wasn't prepared for the woman Jinwoo had forged. Leila didn't pull away. She leaned into the movement. Using the pillar for leverage, she drove her boots into Damien's kneecap with a sickening crunch. As he doubled over, howling in pain, she used the sharp edge of the rusted metal pillar to saw through the zip ties. The plastic snapped. She didn't run for the door. She moved up and in, just as Jinwoo had taught her. Before Damien could recover, she snatched the maglite from his hand and swung it with surgical precision, catching him across the temple. He went down hard, sliding into the grime of the warehouse floor. The two O6 soldiers turned, stunned by the sudden reversal. One lunged for her, reaching for his holster. Leila didn't hesitate. She grabbed a jagged shard of a broken crate from the floor, a makeshift blade for a makeshift queen. She ducked under his reach, her movements a blur of practiced lethality. She drove the wood into the soft tissue of his thigh and twisted. As he collapsed, she used his momentum to propel herself toward the second man, her knee connecting with his chest before he could level his weapon. The warehouse doors were ripped from their hinges. The silhouette of Jinwoo Kim stood in the portal, a smoking gun in his hand and a cold, murderous fire in his eyes. He stopped dead when he saw the scene. Leila stood in the center of the room, her chest heaving, her hands stained with the evidence of her own survival. Damien lay broken at her feet, whimpering for mercy that was never coming. The two O6 soldiers were incapacitated, groaning in the shadows. Jinwoo walked toward her, his heavy boots echoing like a funeral march. He didn't look at the men she had defeated. He looked only at her. He reached out, his gloved hand tilting her chin up. For the first time, he didn't see a masterpiece to be protected. He saw an equal. "I told you," Jinwoo whispered, a dark, reverent pride blooming in his voice. "The blade is more intimate than the hand." Leila dropped the bloody shard of wood. She wasn't shaking. The trapped girl was gone, buried under the rubble of the warehouse. "I didn't do it for you," she said, her voice a low, dangerous rasp. "I did it because I'm done being delivered." Jinwoo smiled, a rare, terrifying expression of genuine respect. He wrapped his arm around her, shielding her from the sight of his men moving in to clean the room. "I know," he murmured, "and that is why you are finally ready for what comes next." The warehouse fell into a heavy, artificial silence as Jinwoo's men moved with ghostly efficiency, zip-tying the remaining O6 soldiers and dragging them into the shadows. Damien remained on the floor, his breath coming in ragged, pathetic hitches. He looked up as Jinwoo approached, his face a mask of mud and terror. He tried to speak, to offer one last lie or a plea for mercy, but Jinwoo didn't give him the chance. He didn't even draw a weapon. He simply looked at a subordinate and gave a single, microscopic nod. Damien was hauled away, his voice silenced by a heavy hand, destined for a fate that the city would never record. To the world, the abusive boyfriend had simply vanished into the night he had tried to weaponize. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the air tasting of wet pavement and ozone. As Leila stepped out of the warehouse, a familiar sedan pulled into the lot, its headlights cutting through the mist. Detective Adrian Stone stepped out, his badge gleaming under the streetlights, his jaw set in a hard, frustrated line. He looked at the fleet of black SUVs, then at Leila, whose clothes were torn and stained with the blood of her own defense. "I heard the shots, Leila," Stone said, his voice weary. "I can end this right now. If you walk away from him and come with me, I can still make the case. We can say you were a victim of a crossfire." Jinwoo stepped up behind Leila, his presence a cold, solid weight. He didn't reach for a gun. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small digital drive, tossing it onto the hood of Stone's car. On that drive, detective, you will find the transaction records between Damien Cross and the O6 syndicate. You will also find the names of the 3 officers in your precinct who were on their payroll. They were the ones who ignored Miss Blackwood's calls for help. Stone stared at the drive, then at Jinwoo. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The system he served was the very thing that had sold Leila to the wolves. Jinwoo had done more than save her. He had exposed the rot that made her need saving. "The girl you're looking for doesn't exist anymore, Stone," Jinwoo said, his voice a low, resonant hum. "She isn't a victim, and she isn't your witness. She's mine. Now take your evidence and clean your house. If I see you near my gates again, I won't be so generous." Stone looked at Leila one last time, searching for the delivery girl he had met a week ago. He found nothing but a woman with a steady gaze and a blade's edge in her eyes. He pocketed the drive, got back into his car, and reversed out of the lot, his taillights fatting into the fog. The ride back to the estate was silent, but the tension was no longer one of fear. When the SUV pulled up to the grand entrance, Jinwoo didn't get out immediately. He turned to Leila, the scar on his cheek catching the moonlight. He reached out, his bare hand covering hers. "The trap is gone, Leila," he whispered. "The men who hunted you are ghosts. The law that failed you is silenced. You could leave tonight. I would give you enough money to never work a delivery shift again. You could find a quiet life." Leila looked at the iron gates, then back at the man who had seen the savage inside her and called it out. The quiet life felt like a funeral. She didn't want to hide. She wanted to rule. "I'm not interested in a quiet life," she replied, her voice firm and absolute. Jinwoo's eyes glowed with a dark, reverent pride. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, not a diamond, but a shard of polished obsidian, sharp and dark as a moonless night. "Then don't stay as a guest," Jinwoo said, his voice dropping to a private, lethal vow. "Stay as my partner. Stay as the woman who stands beside the king, not behind him. Help me run this city, and I promise you, no one will ever dare to look at you and see anything but power." Leila took the ring and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, a cold, beautiful weight. She leaned in, her lips brushing his ear. "I'm not a delivery girl anymore, Jinwoo. I'm the one who decides what gets delivered." As they walked into the estate together, the gates closed with a final, echoing thud. The world outside was the same, but the order of the city had shifted. The girl who was trapped was gone. In her place stood a queen, finally and forever in control.